don't know why Dion's going out with a high school boy. They're like dogs.
Cher's got attitude about high school boys.
It's a personal choice every woman has got to make for herself.
It's incredible how differently you perceive the media you consumed as a child when you watch it as an adult. Because I, as a young gal, used to watch TV shows like Instant Star, dying for Tommy, Q, and Jude to make it official. But I watched that shit the other day, and while the show was still just as good as I remembered, because absolutely nobody was doing it how Canadian television for teens was doing it in my youth, shout out to the end, Tommy's ass needed to be in jail, okay? Jail, you hear me?
Electric chair.
You know how insane it was that they had us rooting for 22-year-old Tommy to be with 16-year-old Jude, whose career he was managing and whose older but also teenage sister he was dating? Almost as insane as Pretty Little Liars trying to convince us that 15-year-old Aria and her English teacher were meant to be.
Jesus Christ.
Even Moesha had an episode where she was kissing up on a high school photography teacher. Listen, I've gone down a rabbit hole, but I say all that to say, it is insane how often I revisit beloved media of my youth only to get slapped in the face with an open palm at this shameless agenda to romanticize grown-ass adults preying on children. And I say that because the movie we're discussing today is the latest case of me being bitch slapped with a healthy dose of, oh no, what is this, honey?
What is this, honey?
Because let me tell you, the last time I watched Clueless, I was a child in the Bahamas. And the only things I really remember thinking about it was that Ty did Cher dirty and that Cher and Josh were such a cute couple. Only for me to rewatch this movie recently and learn that neither of those things are true. In fact, not only was Ty a victim, ain't shit was cute about Josh nasty ass in this movie.
Police! Police! Help!
And yes, I say that Ty was a victim, but we're not here to talk about that today. I'm sure that's been done. We're also not here to talk about Dion and Murray, but I would be remiss if I did not point out how crazy it is that even in this rich-ass movie about rich-ass people, they still took the time out to microaggress the out of the only Black characters by painting them as a loud, ghetto, toxic relationship.
Dion and her boyfriend Murray are in this dramatic relationship. I think they've seen that Ike and Tina Turner movie just too many times.
Like that shit even makes sense for two Beverly Hills ass 90s racism didn't even one make sense. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. Back to Josh and Cher. Let me tell y'all something right now. I believe in pod wholesome ass Rudd supremacy, okay? And I believed in it for a long time. So I understand why child me couldn't see past Paul Rudd's cuteness to know that he was a predator. Especially when Cher was constantly expressing her desire not to date high school boys and it never once being challenged on the basis of her being a literal child. But 32-year-old me is not going for it. You hear me? Again, I say, police!
Police! Help!
There is a lot to be said about Clueless's romanticized portrayal and normalization of a completely inappropriate relationship between 16-year-old Cher and her college-age stepbrother. And we will say it, trust. But there's also a lot to be said about the overall mishandling of Cher and young girls like Cher. Because while I'm sure most people can look back at Clueless and see clearly that a college student preparing to go to law school has no business dating his 16-year-old stepsister,
Absolutely not.
less people readily identify the way that Cher was adultified by her father and everybody around her, and how that adultification was actually at the core of why she, and girls like her, are able to be victimized in plain sight without anyone objecting to it or even identifying them as victims. So, without further ado, this is the adultification of Cher Horowitz. Roll the theme song, Aaron!
Black independent, strongest in women. It's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay now. I know that I'm worth it, so make sure to listen. It's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay.
What's fascinating to me about Clueless is that its pop culture icon status is owed mostly to the 90s aesthetic of the movie and its subsequent television show, more than collective reverence for any actual plot or lesson we were meant to take away as the audience. But watching Clueless with adult eyes, What actually stuck with me was how rich the message could have been had they simply changed the movie's ending to support the story they'd actually been telling. The story that was encapsulated in the movie's name, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that. If a movie is called Clueless, then the obvious question becomes, clueless about what? Most people would tell you the answer is love, because that's the answer explicitly presented to us by the movie. By the end of the film, we're meant to believe Cher's big realization is that she's been in love with Josh all along. The audience is encouraged to see her romantic feelings for him as the thing she was clueless about. But watching Clueless as an adult, not only was that not at all what Cher was clueless about, I think the entire movie tells a completely different story than the one it thinks it's telling. Because when you strip away the fashion, the comedy, and the romance, what you're left with is the story of a little girl who lost her mother, was forced to grow up too quickly, and became so convinced she was an adult that she couldn't recognize her own vulnerability. And neither could anyone else, including the man charged with protecting her, which actually made her more vulnerable. Watching Clueless through adult eyes, I see a surprisingly nuanced illustration of how the adultification of young girls leaves them vulnerable to predation, up until the third act of the movie, where it feels like it suddenly shifts gears to give the teenage audience it was intended for a cookie-cutter rom-com ending that actually fundamentally undermined the lesson the movie felt like it was moving towards. One where Cher finally understood that she's just a girl, trying her best to navigate young womanhood without a mother, that she's owed more from her father, and that she's being failed by the males and adults around her. But the ending we get, where she's openly in a relationship with her adult stepbrother, affirms this misguided, clueless idea that Cher had all throughout the film, that she's grown already, growner than her high school peers, in need of an adult boyfriend, and right to place stock and validation in her ability to make herself useful to her father and those around her. The final resolution, and ultimately the moral of the story, is such a sharp deviation from the almost coming-of-age story meets cautionary tale for teen girls that we were watching until the final act, that I wouldn't be surprised if the studio stepped in and forced that ending to appeal to more teen girls than a movie that came right out and said,
hey, you're a kid. Be a kid. You should be dating other kids. Your father should be treating you like a kid. And grown men who like you when you're a kid need to be stoned.
Could have appealed to. So it wouldn't surprise me if that did happen, because Hollywood loves to change stories to make them more commercially viable, which is why the writer Pretty Woman was forced to change the ending to a happier one where Edward and Vivian stay together. But whether that's what happened to Clueless's ending or not, the ending we got feels like an endorsement of exactly what the rest of the movie felt like it was warning against. Whilst I understand that teen girls would prefer to swoon over Paul Rudd and see a teen girl like them get that guy that they're swooning over than get a rich lesson in why they're still kids no matter how mature they think they are, that's because they're kids and they don't know any better. But adults do, which is the fundamental problem with having a movie where the 15, 16-year-old protagonist is constantly framed as grown as she repeatedly expresses her desire to date a man instead of a boy, and instead of that being called out as flawed thinking at any point in the movie, it's used as a way to minimize the idea that she's being preyed on by her adult stepbrother, because people will say, no, well, she thinks she's grown. She wanted to date an older man. And that misguided perception is also reinforced by the fact that entering into a relationship with her adult stepbrother is not the movie's conflict. It's the resolution.
You need to leave!
You would think that if she decides to date her stepbrother, the conflict would be getting their father or their community's approval. But no, her father doesn't object and neither does anyone else, because everyone around her has bought into this idea that she isn't a child because of the way she acts or the amount of responsibility she's left to handle. But she is a child. And no matter what a child thinks they want, know, or understand, they are clueless to the reality of the situation that adults are fully abreast of. And that should have been the movie's lesson. But the movie's lesson ends up being the exact opposite, which is such a dangerous ass notion to affirm in the minds of children. When Cher's father's employee called Josh out for being too busy flirting with a child to realize she's f***ing up the case, the shame that passes between the attorney and Josh as he flimsily denies the allegations for a moment before turning around and seeing Cher balled up like the child she is on the stairs, ready to cry because she's a 16-year-old girl who just got yelled at by her dad's employee, should have been the moment that either Cher or Josh realized that, oh shit, she is a child. She actually shouldn't be left to work on her dad's major case, and he shouldn't be flirting with her. But instead, Josh and the teenage girl barely out of training bras kiss and begin a relationship. Cher is literally visibly a child, and she even dresses and speaks in ways that make her appear even younger in these intimate scenes with Josh.
Bye, Daddy.
I was packing Daddy up.
Hello? Daddy says it's a good investment.
Look how this man is be looking at this little young gal as she walk around in her little tight clothes showing nothing but her childlike body.
Some people are not lucky enough to be as naturally adorable as you are.
Stop it. You're making me blush.
Step back and sing it for a vomit!
It's hard for people to understand that Cher is a victim because she's a wealthy blonde white girl living in Beverly Hills, seemingly doing whatever she wants and getting whatever she wants, including the guy she wanted. But Cher can be a rich, privileged white girl and also be a victim. And what makes Cher's particular plight worth examining is because it's unfortunately the most relatable thing about her, as so many young girls of all racial and financial backgrounds suffer from being adultified. Cher is just a very nuanced example of how young girls are adultified and why it goes unidentified as a problem. But before we go any further, let me tell you about this video's sponsor, Mira. In case y'all didn't know, your girl is in your 30s. Which means I be trying to get my life together. And a huge part of that is understanding my body and my hormones better. Because I promise y'all, when I turned 30, my whole body hit factory reset on me and I didn't know what was going on. And even though I be in and out of the doctor's office, because so much of women's health gets downplayed or reduced to just deal with it, or that's normal. As women, we often gotta seek out additional information about what's going on with us, which is what led me to start using Mira. Mira is an at-home hormone monitor that helps you track multiple hormones throughout your cycle and gives you personalized insights into what's happening in your body over time. What I like about it is that it goes beyond just looking at a calendar and guessing. The Mira Hormone Monitor Ultra 4 Kit tracks 4 hormones, FSH, LH, E3G, and PDG, by using testing wands and a monitor that syncs with the app. Instead of wondering why your cycle feels different from month to month, you can actually see patterns developing over time. And honestly, as someone who has dealt with hormone-related issues and spent years trying to figure out what my body is doing, because your girl don't just PMS, I have PMDD. If you know, you know. I appreciate having more information rather than less. Whether you're trying to conceive, dealing with irregular cycles, navigating hormone changes, or you're just somebody who wants a better understanding of your cycle, Mira gives you a much more personalized picture of what's going on. Something else I think is really cool is that if you have an Oura ring, you can actually sync that data with the Mira app and see things like your sleep and temperature trends alongside your hormone data, giving you a more complete picture of your body. More than 300,000 women have used Mira, and their technology has helped predict over 1.9 million ovulations worldwide. So if you've been wanting to better understand your hormones and stop feeling like you're guessing all the time, this is a really interesting tool to check out. Kickstart your hormone tracking journey with Mira using my link below and use the code on screen and in the description below to save 25% off Mira kits. Kickstart your hormone tracking journey with Mira using the link in the description and using the code on screen to save 25% off Mira kits. Thanks for sponsoring this video, Mira. Now let's get back to it. The story we're actually showing in Clueless is a rich one, about a young girl whose mother died when she was a baby, forcing her to have to parent herself and take care of her workaholic lawyer father who loved her, but his patriarchal worldview led him to erroneously believe that his daughter's role was to fill in for her mother as head of the household, and that his only obligations to his daughter was to make money and financially provide for her. Throughout the movie, we see 15-year-old Cher taking on the responsibility of monitoring her dad's diet, his health, feeding him, getting him ready for work when he should be getting her ready for school, and even working on his legal cases she had no business working on. And importantly, we don't just see Cher bending over backwards to be as useful to her father as possible, which directly came at the expense of her ability to be the child in their relationship. We see him acknowledge it and applaud her for it. Cher does not just take care of her father. It's how she tries to prove her worth to him and to herself, which is a troubling pattern that an attentive, more emotionally intelligent father might notice and correct, but instead, he notices and reinforces it. We see this when Cher gets down on herself and questions herself later into the movie, leading her dad to reassure her by saying to her, "Who takes care of everyone in this household? I haven't seen such good doing since your mother."
I have not seen such good doing since your mother.
Cher is his child. He should be taking care of her, but instead, Cher is being left to raise him and herself.
Who makes sure that daddy eats right?
The result is a 15-year-old girl who thinks she's a grown woman because her father doesn't provide her the care and parenting one would provide a child. What's interesting to me is whether audiences are able to identify the adultification of a child as a negative thing depends on their perception of the parent. Take, for example, Susan and Julie Myers on Desperate Housewives. Susan was constantly leaning on her daughter Julie emotionally, treating her like a friend instead of a child and relying on her in ways a parent shouldn't, like leaving Julie to take care of the household, make sure they eat, support her during her breakups, sometimes even pay the bills, and so much more. Most people can have no trouble seeing that Julie was parentified and why it was a bad thing, because not only was Susan visibly incompetent, she was a woman. And we hold women and mothers to way higher standards than we hold men and fathers, whom we only expect and applaud the bare minimum. Which is why the same audiences who can see Julie taking care of Susan and immediately recognize that something is wrong, struggle to identify the exact same problems with Mel's relationship with his daughter Cher. Mel isn't a hot mess like Susan Meyer. He's a successful attorney, he's wealthy, he's respected, he keeps a roof over Cher's head, he doesn't look incompetent. In fact, he looks like the exact kind of father we're conditioned to admire, because we haven't been conditioned to expect true nurturing and child rearing out of fathers. Fathers are not expected to be involved and present in the way that mothers are. If a man is present in the home, financially providing for that home and not abusing the children, he's exceeded the general expectations the patriarchy has for fathers. Which is why it's easier to miss that the same thing that happened to Julie was happening to Cher. Parentification doesn't always look like a child raising an obviously dysfunctional parent. Sometimes it looks like a child taking care of a parent who appears perfectly capable. The difference is that Susan's incompetence is visible, while Mel's neglect is hidden behind success. Cher is expected to function like an adult. She's managing people, solving problems, negotiating her grades, taking responsibility for things that shouldn't be her responsibility, like her father's legal work, and navigating terrain even adults way older than her would struggle with. Moreover, it becomes how she sees her value and her place in the world. The same way Cher tries to bond and maintain her relationship with her father by proving her usefulness, making him proud by negotiating her grades like him, by taking care of him like her mother would, and so on and so forth. That same pattern repeats itself in all of her other interpersonal relationships. Cher is always desperate to be perceived as improving the lives of people around her. Whether it's trying to get her teachers together or trying to better Ty's life in the misguided way that she sees fit, Cher finds herself trying to prove her worth and her maturity by interfering in other people's lives because it's how she's already been conditioned to approach the most important relationship in her life, the one with her father. So when Cher looks around at her life, she thinks to herself, she must not really be a child. And because she's good at it, everyone rewards her for it. And that's the trap, because competence and maturity are not the same thing. But when a child is consistently praised for acting older than they are, they begin to internalize the idea that they are older than they are. And they feel that they must act the way they believe an adult would act. And that's what happened to Cher. The adults around her don't treat her like a child. Her father don't treat her like a child, and he doesn't protect her like a child either. She builds her identity around being the girl who's got everything figured out, who's smarter than her peers, who's basically grown and knows how to handle these things. Which is why, when her friend Elton sexually harasses her in the car before leaving her stranded and vulnerable in the middle of LA somewhere, while she does vocally recognize that she was sexually harassed in her narration, she ultimately shrugs it off. She doesn't bother to tell her father or really anyone else about this, nor does she call him for help. At just 15 years old, Cher already sees sexual harassment as a norm that she doesn't expect anyone to protect her from or address, including her father. So much so that despite the fact that she's quite literally in danger, she was sexually harassed, she was abandoned on the side of the road, and she was robbed.
Turn away. And I will totally shoot you in the head.
She doesn't see any of that as enough to rise to the level of receiving her dad's aid. So she calls the only other person she can think of to help her adult stepbrother.
Hello?
Josh, you busy?
Which is a sad, up reality the movie never hones in on as the up thing that it is. Think about it. Cher was failed by just about every man she knows in the movie. Her father's adultification of her has already robbed her of her childhood and made it so she doesn't turn to him in that moment of crisis. Her friend Elton, whom she trusts enough to get in a car alone with so he could drive her home, makes several unwanted advances at her, and because she won't acquiesce to them, he throws her out the car, and the only person she thinks she can call in her moment of need, her stepbrother, is actually less motivated by the desire to help his teenage sister and more by latent lust. That Josh got his grown ass out of bed with the fellow adult woman he's actually dating in college.
Who is it?
It's Mel's daughter.
so he can go pick up his teenage stepsister, who he will spend the rest of the movie looking at longingly as she walks by him in tight little kids' clothes that emphasize her childlike body. That's some sad-ass up shit, you know. And it doesn't stop being sad and up just because she's too young and clueless to clock it as such, because she places value in taking care of her father, thinks it's normal for teenage boys to try to force themselves on girls, or has a crush on her stepbrother. Young people often don't realize those things. That's precisely why we as adults are supposed to protect them and fill in the gaps. But often, for many more kids than Cher, that's not what happens. The really fucked up thing is that Elton sexually harassing Cher and leaving her stranded only to be rescued by college-age Josh becomes evidence in the movie to support why Cher doesn't want to date high school boys, and why Josh is who she should be with and should have been with all along. When in reality, Josh and Elton are two sides of the same coin. What's the difference between the 16-year-old boy who tries to kiss his 16-year-old friend without her consent because the moment presented itself, and the at least 22-year-old man who kisses the 16-year-old who can't consent because the moment presented itself? Perception. Cher thinks she wants Josh because she perceives him as more mature and more desirable than a teenage boy, because she perceives herself as more mature. But the reality is, she's a girl being taken advantage of by both boys and men whom she trusted. But that's lost on her, because it's lost on everyone else. One of the strangest things about rewatching Clueless as an adult is realizing how little anyone seems concerned with the fact that Cher is 16 years old. And that's not accidental. It's because everyone in the movie has already accepted the same premise that Cher has, that she's basically grown. She's treated like she's this more mature, sophisticated, and exceptionally responsible young lady. So when inappropriate situations arise, nobody identifies them as inappropriate because they've already convinced themselves that she's not really a child in the first place, which is the unfortunate reality of so many young girls all over the world who get labeled fast and fresh and blamed for the world's adultification and sexualization of them instead of being protected, which is what makes Cher such a tragic character underneath the wealth, privilege, and iconic 90s fashion. Because ultimately, Cher is just a girl trying to navigate womanhood entirely on her own, and she's doing it in an environment that mistakes her competence for adulthood, her usefulness for maturity, and her confidence for understanding. And the saddest part is that Cher mistakes those things too, which is why I think the movie gets its own ending wrong. Because the thing Cher needs to discover isn't that she loves Josh. The thing that Cher needs to discover is that she's still a child, that she doesn't have to have everything figured out, that she doesn't have to perform adulthood, that she doesn't have to spend her life proving how mature she is. The real tragedy of Cher Horowitz isn't that she didn't know who she loved. It's that nobody around her seemed interested in protecting her enough to remind her that she was still a kid. And in that way, Clueless failed Cher and all the young girls like her.
Y'all know I finally launched merch, right? Okay, that's right. The Illuminativerse finally has merch so you can rep your favorite channel. Okay, that's right. Whether you're an Illuminati pop girl like myself, an Olay and chill enthusiast like my baby sister, an Olay and friends stan like all my friends, or somebody who locks in for a 2-hour Illuminati production, we've got something for you. We've got mugs, shirts, and hats. It's all very cute because Cartoon Me is adorable. Shout out to Tunerific Tariq for being the man behind her. And to my pop watchers in particular, please notice you wore me down and I finally gave y'all the Shoot Me With Your Big Gun merch y'all kept begging me for. But it's a mug. Y'all are not getting a shirt because I made one. I'm wearing it. And I want y'all to know, shoot me with your big gun on a shirt feel like target practice, and y'all ain't gonna say that I send y'all out there like that. But I genuinely love my merch, not just because it's mine, but because I ordered everything myself before showing it to y'all, so I can make sure the quality was good, because I can't have y'all spending y'all hard-earned money on garbage. Which is why I'm pleased to report that I now have a cupboard full of beautiful glossy mugs and a drawer full of the comfiest Illuminati shirts. So if you've ever wanted to support the channel or rep your favorite corner of the Illuminativerse, or just walk around with my cartoon face on your chest, check out the merch store linked in the description below, or go to Illuminati-shop.fourthwall.com, or use the QR code on your screen to make sure you get your Illuminati merch today. That's Illuminati-shop.fourthwall.com, or click the link in the description below, or use the QR code on screen to run me your money today. Now let's get back to the video. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, congratulations! You've officially wandered into the Illuminativerse. Now before you get overwhelmed, let me explain where exactly you've landed, because apparently one YouTube channel was not enough for me. If you're looking for my biggest productions, the kinds of videos that require me to disappear into a cave for 6 weeks and emerge with an existential crisis, subscribe to Illuminati, my flagship channel, where you'll find my magnum opuses like If Pretty is a Privilege, Ugly is a Curse, How This Didn't Age Well Destroyed Media Literacy, How Men Become Aziz
season, sorry. Why serial killers aren't monsters, and so much more. If you're here because you love television, movies, and hearing me explain why everybody misunderstood your favorite character, subscribe to Illuminati Pop, my TV and film essay channel. That's where you'll find fun deep dives on How I Met Your Mother, Sex and the City, Desperate Housewives, You, Euphoria, Insecure, Girlfriends, and more. And if you'd like to watch my videos uncensored, get early access, and support the channel directly, just join the Illuminati Pop Patreon. If you are looking for chaos and a good time, subscribe to Olay and Chill, where I unpack reality TV, TikTok drama, documentaries, chaos in internet, and whatever nonsense the internet has cooked up this week. If you'd like to watch me and some of my favorite Black creators and thinkers come together to discuss the culture, subscribe to Olay and Friends. If you're looking for shorter commentary on whatever the internet is currently spiraling about or whatever's on my mind, subscribe to Illuminati Bites. If you want to watch me and my bitch Kenny JD laugh, overshare, talk a little shit, and unpack the messiness of life, love, and the internet, and whatever foolishness we watching, subscribe to Olay and Kenny. If politics is more your thing and where you know me from, subscribe to Illuminati Politics for my State of the Union like addresses on O Squared. And if music is your thing and you want to hear what I think about the latest albums and what I'm getting into, subscribe to Illuminati Extras. Subscribe to whichever corners of the Illuminati verse speak to you, or subscribe to all of them and become a full-time resident. And while you're at it, you can follow me everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Twitter at Illuminati. You can also follow Illuminati Pop and Olay and Chill and Olay and Friends on social media so you never miss a thing. Welcome again to the Illuminati verse. Now go look around a little bit, make yourself at home. If you enjoyed this video, it's your lucky day because there's more where that came from. Click the video being recommended to you on your screen right now and start binge watching Illuminati Pop.